And we're so blessed to have, I've been talking you up all month, Dr. Nichols, a clinical neuropsychologist at Emory within the Department of Rehabilitative Medicine. So she works right next door to us at Executive Park 12, where she serves as the Director of Cognitive Rehabilitation and the Director of Neuropsychology for Emory Healthcare Veterans Programs. And both of those capacities, Dr. Nichols' work is about conducting those evaluations to really kind of identify cognitive impairments, other various illnesses and injuries that may be impacting your daily experience. And she also oversees the cognitive rehabilitation therapy program of individuals who are learning to implement those compensatory strategies to improve everyday function. If you've been in our classes at CEP and gone through the cognitive training sessions, you know all about this kind of work. So, Dr. Nichols, it's so nice to have you here with us. And if you guys have any questions, this is our email to get in touch with us after the program. But I want to go ahead and kick it off to you and let you introduce this
Great.
topic. And I'm so curious how this came to be a topic of interest for you and kind of became the talk that it is today.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited about this talk and this opportunity to present this information to you guys. I just really love my job. I love what I do in neuropsychology. I think our brains are really fascinating. But even more specifically, what I love is being in rehabilitation neuropsychology because, traditionally, I think neuropsychologists get the reputation for kind of doing these lengthy assessments. If any of you in the audience have done a neuropsych evaluation, I'm sorry, you were probably quite fatigued by the end of that evaluation. And I think it's really fascinating for those of us who do that work. But what really gets me going and excites me about the work that I do is the what's next. What does this person do from here? What do these family members do from here once they've gotten either a diagnosis or a characterization of somebody's cognitive strengths and weaknesses? You guys don't necessarily care so much about what that profile looks like. What you care about is, what does this mean for me in my day-to-day life and how I function and what my future looks like? So that is a part of why I do cognitive rehabilitation therapy, is to kind of help people with those next steps, whether it's a cognitive impairment that somebody has after a stroke or a traumatic brain injury that they need to learn to work around, or if it's something more like a neurodegenerative process, so an MCI due to maybe an Alzheimer's disease or something like that, where we expect somebody to maybe decline over time. That doesn't necessarily mean nothing can be done or that all hope is lost. And so I really like that aspect of my job. So when I was asked to do this talk, I was really excited about it. I love working with patients. And when Dr. DeWitt, Lisa, and I talked about the topic for this month being Love Your Brain, I got really excited. I'm a February baby myself, so I love Valentine's Day. I get really excited about that. And I just thought that this would be a really nice convergence of topics to think about, how do we show love and how do we show love to people whose brains are changing over time and when we don't really know what the future holds. And so that's kind of the inspiration for this. So I work really well with the topics. When I learned that, I was like, I can definitely work with this. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I will go ahead and start sharing my screen now. So get this into full screen mode. Oh, wait, let me see. Down here. All right. Is everybody able to see that in full screen mode?
We are. It looks great. Thank you.
All right. So far you should just see a nice, pretty, colorful leaf. But I'm going to be talking to you today about how to be unforgettable and showing love as memory fades over time, if that is the path that somebody is on. All right. So what I'm going to touch base on is an overview very, very broadly of the stages of cognitive impairment. So starting with just normal aging, moving into, again, what we call MCI or mild cognitive impairment, and then into dementia and the various stages of dementia. That's not always the outcome for people if they've been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. And I'll say MCI from here on out because it's a mouthful. But I want you guys to have a look ahead to the possibilities and what the future may hold for some of you. I'd rather you have an idea of what the trajectory might look like and be able to be prepared for that if that is in store for you or for a loved one, than not have any idea about what to expect moving forward. Okay. I'll also go through a really brief overview of Chapman's 5 love languages. Some of you may have heard of this before. It's really popular in the general public. I will say at the outset that this is not a research-based, it's not an empirically validated set of love languages. It's really kind of intuitive ways that we show and receive love from one another, both romantically, but also platonically and within families. So I'm going to try and touch on kind of what that looks like in those different aspects of relationships that people might have. And then I'm going to kind of pull those things together. And we're going to talk about how to apply each of these 5 love languages, across the broad stages of cognitive decline. I'm going to focus most heavily on the normal aging, MCI, early to maybe mid stages of dementia. I'll talk some at the end if there's time about what these might look like in late stages, because I know that may not apply for some of you. But again, I want you to have that information at your disposal to be able to look back at this later on in time if it piqued your interest. So again, you can start to think about those things well in advance and kind of have a plan in place for yourself and for your loved ones that hopefully you don't ever have to use, but that you can have if it does come in useful for you. And then hopefully have time to talk about any questions, comments, and suggestions that you guys might have about how to apply these love languages within your relationships. Again, whether those are romantic, platonic, family relationships, whatever have you. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk first about the stages of cognitive impairment through dementia. Again, recognizing that not everybody goes through all of these stages. This is a path that can take place. So our first is normal aging into mild cognitive impairment. This is probably going to be the most relevant for most of you. Within that, we've got kind of 3 broad stages. Stage 1 being no cognitive decline, just a normal human being without any kind of cognitive impairments or difficulties beyond those that maybe those day-to-day struggles that we all experience from time to time. Stage 2 is very mild cognitive decline, so really, really subtle changes that others may or may not even be able to pick up on yet. And stage 3 within that, that's our mild cognitive decline or MCI, mild cognitive impairment stage. And then early or mild dementia. This is technically stage 4 within this particular scale, this Riceberg scale. This would be moderate cognitive decline. So this is when we've moved past what's called MCI and into the very early stages of what's called dementia, where people start to have a little bit more trouble functioning. And I'm going to go through some slides where we talk about some examples of each of these or what these kind of look like to an outsider in just a little bit. Then the middle or moderate stage of dementia. This encapsulates 2 stages, stage 5 and 6. So moderately severe cognitive decline into severe cognitive decline, and then late stage or severe dementia. And this is when there's very severe cognitive decline. So we're going to jump into each of these. All right, so normal aging through MCI. Stage 1, normal functioning. So this is what most of you have experienced for most of your life and what most of you or many of you may still be experiencing. So there's no memory loss. People with no dementia are considered to be in this stage. Okay. Stage 2, or that very mild cognitive decline stage, you might forget names, misplace things from time to time. You're able to balance pretty well. I mean that both literally and figuratively. So, if you are having little slips and failures with your cognitive functioning from time to time, that's still considered pretty normal. This can be something that happens with stress or life events or things like this, but still not a stage where we're too terribly concerned. Okay. At this stage, symptoms might not even be evident to people around you or to doctors yet. And then the MCI stage. This one is, you can see I've got my little roadway here, because at this stage, things can kind of go either way. It's a little bit of a question mark. So at this stage, there's increased forgetfulness, maybe a little bit of difficulty concentrating on tasks and information. You might start to notice changes in your work performance or your relationships, really, really subtle things. Might get lost more frequently or easily. Might have some of that what's called tip of the tongue phenomenon, where you got the word right there. I know what I'm trying to say, but it just won't quite come out. And this is when loved ones start to notice a little bit more. So this stage is really important. And as you guys know, many of you may be in this stage or experiencing it through a loved one as well. And I say that this could go either way because that's really what we know from the research, that people in this stage sometimes return back to where they were before and are able to kind of rebalance things. Sometimes they kind of stay in this stage for a long, long time. And sometimes it can be the precursor for future cognitive decline or moving into dementia. So I'm going to go through the rest of the stages for the sake of context and so that you know what one trajectory may look like. But again, keep in mind that this really is kind of a crossroads stage, and where I'll focus a lot of our attention for how to apply these love languages. Okay, in the early stage or mild dementia stage, this is where we're starting to have a little bit more trouble balancing things on our own, and things that maybe used to be pretty easy for us can start to slip through the cracks a little bit more. And you might find that you need a lot more supports at this stage. Or if you're the loved one of someone who is experiencing this decline, you might have to step in and provide a lot more of those supports than maybe you had in the past. And that's a lot of what we'll talk about today. So in this stage, people might have much more significant difficulty concentrating, maybe more forgetful of recent events, have a lot more trouble completing day-to-day tasks, or maybe more prone to making errors when they're completing those tasks. So this might be things like managing your finances, remembering to pay bills on time, maybe forgetting whether or not you paid something and then accidentally overpaying it. Having trouble traveling to new or unfamiliar places by yourself or without some kind of other supports. At this stage, sometimes people don't recognize really how significant their symptoms are, or how much difficulty they're having. This is a part of the process of brain diseases, and sometimes in other events too, like stroke or traumatic brain injury. Um, this this can be protective in some ways because people aren't as distressed by things that they don't know. Unfortunately, for family members or loved ones, sometimes this might look like denial. So this might look like, no, I'm fine, I don't have these problems, when in reality, they really don't recognize that these problems are as significant as they are, or that they're impacting as much of their day-to-day abilities as they are. At this stage, we might also start to see changes in how people socialize with one another. You might become more withdrawn and kind of avoidant of interacting with other people for a whole lot of reasons. At this stage, usually trained providers, so people like myself, neuropsychologists or neurologists, and even sometimes primary care providers who work with older adults, may have some tests and things that they can start to run to pick up on some of these changes in folks. All right, the middle or moderate stages of dementia. Again, I just want to emphasize everyone does not move on to these stages, but I want you aware that this is a possible trajectory for folks. So in the moderately severe cognitive decline stage, this is when we really start to see very significant memory problems. People start to need a lot more assistance with basic activities, things like dressing themselves, bathing. They may begin to forget personal details about themselves, like where they live, or especially phone numbers, account numbers, things like this. And then, excuse me, they may also start to become more disoriented as to what time it is, what date it is, maybe where they're located, what building or address they're at. In stage 6, with severe cognitive decline, they are certainly going to need more help carrying out those basic activities. You might begin to forget names of family members, forget recent events, and perhaps even some past events that would have otherwise been pretty significant for them. At this stage, there may also start to be a lot more bodily function loss and motor function loss, some difficulty communicating, and then changes in personality and emotional functioning. So at this stage, people might start to become very, very anxious, might start to, in some cases, see things that aren't there or believe things that are not true that they never would have believed in the past. Okay. And then in the very late stage or severe dementia stage, this is when the body really begins to shut down. Again, this is not a foregone conclusion. This is not what happens to everyone who is diagnosed with MCI, but there is a subset of the population who does progress onto this. So at this stage, people are generally unable to speak or communicate with one another. They're going to tend to be bedridden because they will have lost a lot of motor skills or have an inability to walk independently, and they're going to require help with most activities. Okay? As we go through and I talk about the love languages and their applications, I'm going to have some slides towards the end where we talk about what are the applications of these love languages in the late stage specifically, but that's closer to the end because that's something that people can kind of look at later on down the road if it applies to them. So now we'll talk about Chapman's 5 love languages. And many of you may have heard of these, as I said before. So one of them is quality time. So this is time spent with one another. I'll go more into detail about that when we get to that slide. Another is acts of service. So anything that you can do to be of service to someone. Gifts, that one's pretty straightforward. This is referring to tangible gifts that you might give one another, or if you like to receive gifts. Physical touch, also pretty straightforward, but something to clarify is, again, this is not just sexual or intimate touch. I think a lot of people assume that, but this can be touch in a lot of different ways and through a lot of different types of relationships. And then words of affirmation. So this is, speaking in terms of love, in terms of endearment and such. So let's hop into how these are applied across different stages of cognitive decline. So again, quality time. This is uninterrupted, protected, focused time with your loved one. In the stages of normal aging through mild cognitive impairment, so that early stage, and where many of you may be, this might look like spending time together, engaging in shared interests and hobbies. When you're engaging in these activities, being really mindful and attentive in conversations. So not sitting and talking to one another while you're scrolling through phones or watching TV and just kind of bantering back and forth during that, but really focus time on one another and on the activities that you're engaging in. This might also look like reading or consuming media together and discussing it afterwards. So if you are folks who like to go to the symphony or go to art exhibits, or even if you're like me, watch some of the same TV shows, even if they're not necessarily very intellectually stimulating, but watching those together and bonding over them and talking about them together. It's a big plus if your quality time can include physical, social, and cognitive activity, because these are things that have been shown to stave off cognitive decline, even if you're at risk of declining in the future because of some kind of genetic factor or something else. Okay? In the early stage of dementia, so again, shifting out of that mild cognitive impairment stage and into more of that dementia stage where you have more trouble functioning, the loved one, whoever that may be, whether that's a spouse, a child, a family friend, whoever that is, they might have to do a little bit more active planning, scheduling, and reminding to whoever they're spending that time with to say, okay, I'm setting aside this time for you, and I'm going to help protect that time by putting it on your schedule or making you aware of it and reminding you that we have these plans together. You might do things like playing games that are simple but stimulating. This is really great if you've got grandkids, great grandkids, nieces, nephews, can be your kids as well. But I really like this. My grandmother-in-law is really active in playing games with all the the grandkids and great grands. And I think it's something that's helped her remain relatively sharp. What you want to think about if somebody is in these earlier stages of dementia is that they might need a lot more reminders about the rules, and maybe a little bit more help with adding up scores for things if it's a game where you're keeping score. But be patient with one another with this. And it might take them a little bit longer to learn the rules of a game. So something you might do is have the rules written out somewhere easily accessible so that you can refer to them, or the loved one can refer to them frequently as you guys are playing these games. Um, Something that you can do that demonstrates quality time in these early stages of dementia and beyond, and even in the normal aging stages, ask questions of the loved one, or of each other, about familiar, well-known topics. Ask them to teach you about something that you don't know about, that they're kind of an expert in, and you can kind of see how people will light up when they get to talk about things that they really enjoy or that they know very well. Uh, Quality time can also look like hosting or attending social gatherings, especially as people start to withdraw. Um, this can be something, again, that hits at that social activity that we know is really so good for our brains and our brain health. But the things that you want to consider as people are starting to have cognitive decline is that you might want to prep your loved one beforehand, or you guys prep together with reminders about the names and relationships of people. If you have pictures to look at, that's fantastic. And one of the things I love to suggest for some of my patients is to come up with some gestures for one another for help in social situations. So if you, let's say that I'm the person with MCI, or starting to show these memory declines, what I might want to do with my husband is say, okay, if I squeeze your hand, or if I look at you in this way, or if I use this code word, that means I have forgotten this person's name. Please save me. And you be the one to say that person's name, or help us get out of this situation so that I can, reconvene and then come back to it later. So this is something that might take a little bit more prep than maybe it would have if somebody didn't have some of these difficulties. Okay, some other things that you can do to demonstrate quality time as a way of loving someone: cook meals together. Doing these things together when somebody's in these earlier stages of decline can help maintain that level of activity and independence, but also with a level of support and supervision, just to make sure that things are safe and sound. Um, Asking to be taught recipes or techniques, maybe even spending time writing down family recipes that can be passed on as gifts to younger generations. Going for walks is a great one, because you're getting out there, getting some vitamin D, and staying active while also focusing attention on one another. Try some new activities together. So things that are new to both of you. You might, or many of you, depending on how big of a group that you've got together, spending this quality time together. So it might be something like a beginner art class, photography course, or something else entirely different. Attending family activity events like sporting events, performances for kids, grandkids, great grandkids, nieces, nephews, whatever that may be. Again, with the caveat that you may have to do a little bit more planning and reminding than you may have before some of these difficulties started. Play question and answer games. There's lots of these available online, where you kind of have a box of cards and you pull out 20 questions. You don't have to have information memorized for these. It can be things like, tell me about one of your most favorite days ever. Tell me about a time when you were really challenged. And you can learn a lot about people, even that you've known a long time. Listening to audiobooks together might be something that's also enjoyable, that you can discuss later. And also, if somebody is starting to have difficulty with reading or concentrating while reading, this is another way of getting some of that information in without having to physically read a book. As people progress to the middle stages of dementia, so again, more of that significant decline, quality time might look like keeping a really consistent and predictable routine of activities. It can be really distressing and confusing if somebody is starting to become disoriented and their life is really chaotic and they don't know what day of the week it is. If you've got a nice, consistent routine, then that provides a sense of comfort and really demonstrates, hey, I care about what's happening with you and what your experience is. I want to make sure that you feel safe and protected during this time that is otherwise really confusing and sometimes scary. If you're able to, or if you have family or friends able, protect time to attend medical appointments with your loved one. Because again, this can be a really scary and confusing process as people are starting to have difficulties with their memory or other cognitive abilities. You might also continue to work on games and puzzles and arts and crafts things, but you might want to make them a little bit simpler so that they're not overly frustrating. As sometimes motor abilities decline too, you want to make sure that you're engaging in things that won't be overly frustrating or impossible sometimes for some of those motor skills. Play or sing favorite music together. This is always a good one. I really love music, and it doesn't require any talent on the part of anyone. You can sing as loudly or off key as you like, as long as your family and friends are okay with it. All right. So we'll move into acts of service. So acts of service are really action oriented, intentional completion of tasks for the other person. These are activities that lessen the cognitive burden on your loved one. And so it's kind of doing things for the other person. I will also say really broadly, I haven't mentioned it yet, but each of these things, these are of course really broad suggestions, but you want to think about your specific partner or loved one and what are the things that they will enjoy for quality time, what are the things that they will enjoy for acts of service, and that will be helpful for them. And we'll talk about that with gifts and physical touch and all of that as well. But again, these are pretty broad. You want to think about what it'll look like for your specific loved one. So acts of service, for folks in the normal aging up to MCI stages would maybe be things like creating a task list together. Instead of a honey-do list, this would be kind of a we-do list, and share that burden jointly. Especially as somebody is in that MCI stage, this can be really helpful because it's kind of rebalancing things, particularly if folks have been together for a really long time and one person has traditionally been the one who has taken much of that cognitive burden. It can begin to feel much heavier than it had in the past. And so if you can do this together and shift those scales together with a plan, then it can help to ease that load and not feel like everything is just being dumped on one person or the other. And even better if you've got a network of family or friends that can support and kind of distribute that burden a little bit more evenly, whatever's feasible for you guys. Acts of service, also looks like proactivity. So looking around for the things that they would normally complete on their own, or that would be challenging or complex for somebody, especially as they become more complex for a person, proactively taking care of those things. And again, this can apply even to the normal aging stages. Not so long ago, my husband planned a whole staycation for us, and I was so touched by this just because it wasn't on my radar. It was just something he kind of did out of the blue, and it was really meaningful. It made me feel very, very loved, and I hope that I reciprocated that for him because I really appreciated it so much. If you're able to, not everybody has the means to do this, but it can be helpful if you're able to, hiring out some of these burdensome tasks. So if you're able to hire somebody either regularly or maybe just on special occasions for things like cleaning up the house, doing some of the grocery shopping, planning some meals, that can be really helpful. I'll talk about some other ways of doing that in a little bit. Engage in planning aspects of the tasks. This is so much of the cognitive load and so much of what folks with MCI tend to describe as being difficult for them. I used to be able to do these things without thinking about it. These plans kind of fell into place. And now those are the things that I'm really noticing I struggle with. So if the care partner, whoever that is, can start to take over some of those things, but then still involve the person who's starting to have cognitive decline, then this can look really like a way of expressing love for that person and demonstrating, again, I care about you, I care about what you're experiencing here. In the early stages of dementia, as things start to decline further, the loved one or loved ones might take more of an active role in planning for some of these things. So, reminding, scheduling tasks. This might look like creating and managing a shared calendar, a whiteboard where you keep somewhere in the home where everybody can see it, where again, there's that sense of safety and orientation for the person who's starting to have more and more memory difficulties. This might look like planning an itinerary and arranging travel for the trips, the outings, even if those are just the day-to-day outings that people are engaged in. Again, I mentioned arranging a staycation, getaway, spa day. This is great at any stage of aging whatsoever. It's something that I think most people really appreciate. But you do have to know your loved one pretty well to know what they would enjoy about those kinds of trips or outings. Um, Taking notes at appointments, picking up someone's medications, helping refill their prescriptions. This is an act of service for people who may start to have difficulty caring for some of those tasks themselves. One that I really, really love, learn a new skill yourself to maybe take over some of those activities that your loved one used to do just fine on their own. This might be things like learning how to cook if you've not traditionally been the person who's cooked in your home, learning how to do someone's hair if that hasn't been something that you've done in the past, other grooming techniques or strategies. I'm going to pause my share here because I've got a video that really demonstrates this that I really love. So bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to show that video. And I'm going to share it with sound. Okay. Hopefully you guys are able to see this. In just a second, I will turn on the sound. Here we go.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. I trust you, sweetie.
Okay,
so take this eyeshadow. This is her beautiful eyeshadow, her beautiful blues. And I want you to take the lightest color and just, dab in the lightest color. Good.
I don't put too much on her.
Not too much. And then yep. You see here under the eyebrow? Yep. You just put a little bit under the eyebrow.
Seems good.
You're gonna look beautiful.
I hope
Is that
so.
all right?
Yeah, now let's do the same thing on the other side.
I just don't feel right without my makeup on.
I
You
know,
know.
I don't feel right without my makeup on either. So this is her beautiful pink.
I love that
I know you
color.
said you don't go anywhere without your
No,
lipstick.
no, I
So,
don't.
okay, so this is where you're gonna just use a little delicate edge. We can clean it up if you need to. I'll show you how.
Okay.
Yes.
Almost got it.
That's
Oh,
pretty.
it looks so, that color is so pretty.
You did a really good job.
Oh,
Thank you, it's
I'm
my
so
first time.
nervous.
There's my girl.
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Oh, honey, I look beautiful.
Yes,
I
you
look
do.
like myself now.
Yes, you do.
Oh, thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank
Oh, there I am.
Oh, wonderful.
All right. I love that video. Let me get back to my PowerPoint here. So touching. And I saw that and knew that I needed to share this with anyone that I could because that is such a beautiful demonstration of an act of service. Learning how to do something for your partner and showing them, hey, I see you. I know you don't feel like yourself. Here's something I can do to help bring you back to me, help bring you back to who you've been in the past to the best of my ability. So love, love that. All right. So other acts of service that you might engage in, things like planning a weekly menu together, doing the shopping for the ingredients, again, with the input of your loved one, arranging also a menu of enjoyable activities to choose from, and maybe getting together the materials and supplies that you would need or that they would need to engage in those. So if there's somebody who has started to get into arts and crafts, getting them some things to be able to do that throughout the day as they like or as they enjoy. Another act of service, a less romantic one, but very necessary one, is to start to get legal documentation in place and talk about future plans, talk about future wishes if this person is going to decline. Never know. what the future will hold. We don't have a crystal ball that we can look into, but it's really important to prepare for the possibilities of the future. And that really is an act of love to take someone's wishes into consideration before the event of further decline or some kind of other incident. Okay? In middle stages of dementia, as people start to lose more of their abilities, either cognitively or with motor functioning, this might look like picking out clothing for a day or a week so that this person doesn't have to make as many decisions. And particularly if they're not as oriented to the season, they might not pick weather appropriate clothing. And so, you being the person to be able to choose those things and kind of set them out for them can really be an act of love for them. Scheduling services for grooming or appearance maintenance, right? So you may not want to learn how to do your spouse's makeup. You may have no interest in cutting hair, and maybe you're like me and you can't cut in a straight line to save your life, even if you don't have any kind of cognitive difficulties. So scheduling those services to be done by professionals, if you've got the means and the ability to do that, can be a way of helping them maintain their level of grooming and appearance that they want to at this stage of cognitive decline. Scheduling and providing or arranging transportation to appointments and events can be an act of service. If somebody is at a stage where they start to lose bodily functions or control over bodily functions, cleaning up or arranging for help to clean up for accidents, and doing so without judgment, without frustration to the degree possible. Taking over medications, helping to cut up food and helping with feeding at that stage if somebody progresses to that level. All right, I need to move through a little bit more quickly here. Let's talk about gifts. So these are very straightforward. These are tangible gifts or gestures that are specifically curated or chosen for your loved one. So I've got some suggestions here, but this is going to be so very dependent on the person. And that's really what this means. It's not just, oh, this is something that's got to be really expensive or have high monetary value. This really is getting at that sentimental value of a gift for a loved one. So frankly, at every stage, it's whatever the person likes. So really take what you know about your loved one and go wild with that. So this could be something really small, like flowers, cards, other meaningful treats, like, their favorite snack, or, if they're a Starbucks lover, coming and bringing their favorite coffee drink, preparing their favorite meal, things like this. Personalized mementos are really great. So a memory scrapbook, a home video montage, especially in the MCI stages, or really every stage of aging, a Google Home, Alexa, or any kind of other personal assistant device to help them kind of manage activities, provide reminders of their schedule. Something that I didn't put on here, but that I should have, would be some of these smart frames that exist now. I have given a couple of these as gifts to loved ones in the recent past, where everybody from the family can access and send pictures to the frame. And both my grandmother-in-law have one, and they love them. They're like, don't forget to send me my pictures. Make sure you guys are keeping me updated about what's happening with my grandkids and my great-grands. Those are really good ones. In the early stages of dementia and decline, maybe things like tracker devices for items that they lose frequently, really functional things, a charging station or organizational storage for their belongings, so that they've got a place to put the things that might otherwise get lost. Brightly colored cases or covers for devices or purses, so that they are less likely to lose those things and they're really attention grabbing. Maybe recording devices. This one here, subscription services. I love these. These exist for almost everything now. So if it's something like, hey, my loved one loves fresh flowers, there are flower subscription services now. If there's somebody who otherwise wouldn't necessarily go to the grocery store, there are meal delivery services or meal preparation services that exist now. There are self-care kits, there are candle of the month clubs, there's all kinds of things that you can get in these kind of subscription packages. All right, I'm going to go quickly here. Other things might be audiobooks, materials for activities that they're engaged in, just gifts that remind you of your loved one or that they would love. As people get into these middle stages of dementia, you might look for things that will help them function in day-to-day life better or longer. So I've got some pictures of each of these things that I'll show you in just a second, but I'll move through for the sake of time. So these are some examples of these hydration jelly drops for people who may forget to drink or to eat throughout the day. These are some activity bibs or activity blankets where people who may be more likely to kind of fidget over time as they start to lose their cognitive abilities. This gives them something safe and comfortable to kind of fidget with and play with and keep themselves entertained. And then these are adaptive or built up utensils. So if somebody has motor problems, weakness, or tremors, these are utensils that are available that have kind of a weight to them and that are thicker, so that if you've got fine motor difficulties, this makes it a little bit easier. Okay, physical touch. This is pretty straightforward, right? All the things that you think of with physical touch. So if we're talking about romantic relationships, hugging, kissing, hand holding, making out, sexual activity, the usual things that you would do. But it's not just that. It can also look like having your arm around one another, just touching each other on the leg, holding each other's faces in your hands. Again, I've got this picture here of what looks to be maybe a grandmother and a grandson. So physical touch can be in all kinds of relationships. It does not just mean sexual intimacy. In the early stages of cognitive decline and moving into dementia, continue with the usual, but be aware that people may be less receptive to getting touched by acquaintances or less familiar contacts. Massages might be something that's really welcome if somebody has motor or other physical problems. It may be very comforting. And it might be helpful, say, in social situations where you use soft touch to kind of guide someone through a crowd if they're feeling uncomfortable, or maybe squeezing someone's hand to provide them reassurance or comfort. Hey, I'm here. I've got you. You're in a safe place. You're with me. Okay. Dancing together might be a great way of engaging in physical touch. Doesn't have to be formal, doesn't have to look good, but it engages that physical activity and there's some touching involved in that. Shared low impact exercises like partner yoga, helping with fine motor tasks. So, clasping someone's jewelry, helping put on earrings, helping pull hair back, things like this involve physical touch in more of a platonic or familial way. For the, here we go, middle stages, this might continue with appropriate displays of physical affection. So kissing on the cheek, hugs, hand holding, but you might start to add in more of that physical grooming. So things like brushing someone's hair, giving them sponge baths, moisturizing their skin if they're not able to do so for themselves anymore. Words of affirmation is what it sounds like. It's using our words to demonstrate and reciprocate love. So this might look like love letters, love notes, conversations about what you appreciate about your loved one, lots of positive reinforcement. As people start to decline further, this might look like validation that, hey, what you're experiencing is real and scary, and I'm here and I love you and I care about what you're experiencing. Reassurance that you're still worthy of love. You're having a little bit more trouble with your memory, but you're still you, and I still love that person that you are. Positive reinforcement for any kind of effort to engage in tasks is really welcome. Kind and understanding reminders or cues about information that they may have forgotten. So we want to avoid things like, don't you remember? You already said that. We've already talked about this. Keeping things like, hey, we're going to do this today. I know you might not remember, but here's the plan for later on. Okay. You might put love letters or sticky notes in easy to find places. So on the fridge, on the bathroom mirror, hey, thinking about you, love you, I hope you have a great day. Calls or texts throughout the day, verbal encouragement or cheerleading if somebody's feeling down or anxious. In these, middle stages, keep on talking. Even if somebody doesn't respond or understand as well as they used to, we don't want that to be the end of communication. Use familiar pet names, nicknames, things to kind of remind them, hey, this is who you are, this is who I am, and I love you, I care about you. Provide lots of verbal reassurance if somebody's starting to show these signs of being really anxious or have some of these more concerning behavioral symptoms like seeing things or hearing things. Or believing things that we know not to be true. We want to avoid arguing, avoid trying to discredit or disprove things, avoid trying to convince somebody that they have these difficulties, really just providing a lot of reassurance. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this. We'll have the slides available. I want to make sure I've got time to answer questions. I apologize. But later in these slides, I've also got suggestions for how to apply these love languages in the later stages of decline and dementia. I also just want to very quickly show you guys that in the slides, I've got some resources that I absolutely love about people dealing with dementia and their caregivers. And then these are links to some of the products I was talking about. This is not an endorsement. This is just links in case people are interested in looking further into some of those products.